And we're live. So Oculus is aggressively pushing prices down on virtual reality. Will they win back consumers' hearts and minds? Samsung is gearing up to reveal the second generation of Bixby. Will Nokia continue to ignore North America? Razer might reveal a phone born from Nextbit. And when your phone ages, are performance slowdowns all in your head? We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 274 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded Friday the 13th in October at noon Pacific time. This weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and by this time in the month, you'd probably already eaten an entire bag of Halloween candy by yourself. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong on the East Coast. How's it going, buddy boy?
I mean, Walgreens had it since August or something, so I mean, you should have had plenty of chance to do that. Also, of all the months to have Friday the 13th,
perfect.
This is the best. This is perfect.
As soon as we're done with this podcast, I am going to go buy and download The Evil Within 2 and fire that. I might even live stream it. I don't know. I haven't done a gaming broadcast in a while, but maybe I'll actually fire up my very first playthrough on a horror game there.
Get your Steam machine.
Right. And as you might have noticed, if you're watching the live stream, we are joined a third window on this podcast. Friend of the podcast, my co-host for the Online Geek Book Club, keeper of the Star Trek GIFs, Mr. Andrew Wallace. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah. The my lower third is not working, but if you guys want my contact info,
it turned off. What is wrong with your system, man?
I don't know. But
this has been the most hilarious Hangouts bug because, you know, for us, like, it shut down our live broadcasts for 3 months while we were trying to figure out audio issues. But whenever we go live, your lower third disappears.
Which in the whole spectrum of things.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But in the whole spectrum of things, it's, you know, kind of a light deal. Although maybe we can get a PNG on you sometime and just stick that over there because Juan has been
a proper overlay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
get some art on. We can get you something going on there.
Right, whatever works.
No just for you this time around because you're talking with us. So
yeah. People need to know who you are. That's mandatory. All right. Before we jump into some actual tech tomfoolery, we do want to take a quick minute to thank this week's sponsor, and that is dbrand, manufacturer of custom vinyl cut skins for a variety of different products, different tech pieces. I rock one on my Razer laptop. Obviously, they've been promoting pretty hard for the release of the new Galaxy Note 8 and the new iPhones. I'm looking to maybe get one when I finally get my hands on a V30 again. I think I'm going to switch over to one because you guys recently caught our iPhone coverage. I don't know if I'll be able to show that. I don't have autofocus on my camera, my beautiful camera right now. So I managed to nicely nick and cut into the front face of my iPhone 8. And it was totally I was wearing cargo shorts. I was crouching to get a low shot with the Lenovo Fab 2 Pro, slid right out of my pocket from a height of about a foot and chipped right into the front face and the aluminum band around the iPhone 8 Plus. I was super disappointed by that. And as a situation that totally would have been prevented by having just any extra little bit of traction on the back of that phone. And that's one of the things that dbrand excels at, these custom laser cut skins that perfectly match up with your device, different colors, different textures. I'm a huge fan of the dragon skin skins that help you hold on to your devices better, protect against scratches. And I think they look pretty cool too. Again, if it's that thing you want to customize your device, they've probably got a color, a look, and aesthetic just for your device. If you head on over to dbrand.com, you can check out all of the various devices that they support. It's pretty numerous. They're probably not going to travel into some of the smaller phones that are less popular, but your major brands, your major products out there, MacBooks, if you want to customize your MacBook, you'll be able to find a solution at dbrand. And of course, we will have links down below in the description of this podcast where you can jump straight to customizing an iPhone or a Galaxy Note 8. And they've been pretty good to us. They've actually supplied us with a couple extra skins. And it's just that disappointment of like whenever I have them on the phone and people complain that I have a skin on the phone instead of just showing off the phone. In real life, because of how fragile our smartphones have become, I have become the convert where I keep my phones in cases or I keep skins on them pretty much all the time. And it's a pain when I have to tear the skin off to shoot the review because that's not how I actually use the phone. So that's dbrand, dbrand.com. Check out those skins. Hit the links down below. They'll know that we sent you over to them. That'll definitely help us out here on the podcast. And we thank dbrand for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly.
You know, I hear they're opening up a position for Dragon Slayer. I mean,
yeah,
I suppose
Dragon skin is not cheap, man. I mean, that's a high turnover position, keeping them stocked on fresh dragon skins.
I'm kind of surprised that they do real dragon skins, so that's great.
Especially these days.
I don't know if that's a lie or not.
We're getting through fall. Winter's coming. You know, it's kind of a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed. Well, if you want to survive the cold days of fall and winter with us here on the Pocketnow Weekly, we'd certainly love to have you along. Just talk with us on the Twitters and the Facebooks and wherever that hashtags are sold, appraised, loved, with hashtag PN Weekly, and we'll be able to see your comments as they happen during the podcast because we love to look through that feed live. Also, podcast@pocketnow.com is where you should send your emails if you can't catch us live that you want to get to us, and we'll be able to answer you like that as well. So hashtag PN Weekly, podcast@pocketnow.com. You choose the means and we'll respond to you however we can.
Yeah, we already have a couple tweets coming in with the PN Weekly hashtag. Some fan mail for Jules from @iFillWorld.
What?
Excuse me. Hey, Juan, try not to leave out Jules this week.
Oh, okay.
And we knew what was going to happen last week. We had Joshua Vergara from Android Authority and Tech and T, and he was on the podcast.
I was almost about to take a week off because I was like, they're in the same room.
You knew what was going to happen. So Josh actually was in the Gadget Lab, and he was this when you have that human interaction. I mean, it's things that I love about like the Joe Rogan podcast. It's two people actually sitting face to face, and the conversation just naturally, sort of steamrollers over everything else. And so, I mean, I was really appreciative because Jules was jumping in like with important pieces of information and to try and keep us on track. But we knew it was going to happen with Josh and I producer rails on it.
Yeah. I had to keep time on you guys and just force segues. I had to stomp on Joshua's segues because he loves those, and as a fan of the previous Android Authority podcast myself, I was like, yeah, this is going to be pretty painful, so I might as well just cut it off right there.
Pretty painful or pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing.
Or amazingly painful.
Yeah, that's a good
amazingly painful. Painfully amazing. Amazing.
There we go.
Yes, indeed.
Heard it here first, folks. We're making up new words.
Webster, screw you. Let's talk about news.
Yeah, let's jump into some news. I don't know about screw visuals, but I feel like probably talking about some tech news would be appropriate.
2017. This is all the news that is fit to podcast. The Oculus Go has been introduced at the latest Connect conference. Hugo Barra and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg say that they believe this $199 device will be accessible to the next billion users getting into VR. Developer kits are going out next month. Sales begin early next year. HMD Global Head of Operations Rex Freihofer says that the Nokia 8 is not properly banded for the US and is implicitly trying to say that the US for now, promising future devices for the country. Presumably, the Nokia 8 will perhaps be shadowed by the Nokia 9 that we may see soon. Huawei Mate 10 set to debut next Monday. New intel shows that it is working with a 20 megapixel sensor as well as a 23 megapixel sensor at the back. The largest sense units since the Chinese OEM partnered with Leica to optimize output. Samsung is expected to release version 2 of its Bixby Smart Assistant next week at its development conference in San Francisco. OnePlus has apparently had a device manager tool time step that has interacted with the screen on and off times as well as other little bits and pieces that have gotten a little core of users pissed off in a way. There's a flashable file that can stop that behavior, but OnePlus insists that it's offering better services and after-sales support with that info. Wells Fargo has rolled out 5,000 ATMs with NFC readers for Android Pay, Samsung Pay, and Apple Pay. You don't need your card anymore with that PIN. You just have to tap and then put in that PIN too. And Razer is loading up for an event. All the hints leading up to this point, including spec dump with Snapdragon 835 and 8 gigs of RAM. So the big question for this week is, are we ready for the gamer phone? Is Nextbit going to pull all in for this? Is THX going to have an element in this? And they also have Ouya, which was that micro console thing that ran Android, and it was closed off, and it was just this weird thing. They took up that too. What do we expect from this? Are they going to combine all these
Andrew,
things?
I want to kick right off with you, man. I mean, so you just recently picked up a Huawei Mate 9. You're not rocking a traditional North American phone manufacturer. You've been digging it.
Oh yeah.
Does a company like Razer have the clout in a way that even Nvidia couldn't with their Shield tablets garner, a significant market share? Do they have the potential to crack into a phone market, a device that I think a lot of consumers are very conservative to switch over to? Does this look like they might have the answer on gaming where Microsoft fell apart, where Nvidia fell apart, and where even Motorola struggles to showcase gaming as a platform for the Moto Z?
Well, that's an interesting question, because what I'm thinking is what can Razer bring to the table that you gaming experience wise that you can't get from another Snapdragon 835 device? Right. I would feel like it would come to, one, pricing is going to be key. Just because it's hard, as we've seen with the Essential Phone and all these others, it's hard to get into the upper tier price range. So they'd have to give a lot of bang for the buck, whether or not you're going to have a certain level of VR support. And I think a lot of it might be down to just the handset design itself.
Yeah.
To try and bring this particular audience in, because what's the big question that they've got to solve is what's going to bring people to their phone rather than to a Galaxy. And especially if they can't get carrier deals.
Totally.
Because that's a big problem, because most of the people, especially around here in the Midwest where I'm at, most people will go through the carriers to get their phones. Well, they have to come out of the gate with some sort of deal that, honestly, more than maybe just Sprint,
snazzy display tucked into the back corner of a Best Buy isn't going to do it for most consumers. Really?
Yeah. Like on the second to bottom shelf next to the joysticks,
Microsoft Sidewinders from 1998. Well,
just have them out there.
Because my hypothesis, Jules, is it takes a brand about 3 years before consumers will start taking that company seriously. Do you think Razer has the fortitude to stick out, losing a few fights in the market just to establish a foothold on consumer mindshare?
I think it's establishing a foothold through carrier partnerships, because we have already talked about this about a few months ago, where they set up shop in Hong Kong, this big flagship Razer store, and they, it's sort of prophetic in the run-up. They partnered with the local network 3 and its parent company Hutchison, and they have this special plan. They also say that they're working with hardware and these projects. So I feel like there's a lot of, this was obvious this was coming up in the first place, and that carriers should be aware, especially in Asian, hardcore gamer markets, where this kind of niche thing from a brand that's well known for, if anything, gaming hardware is known for its panache, its optimizations for, tactile function, and just, colors. LED lights going all over the place.
All the RGBs.
Yeah, that's funny. On Twitter, using the PN Weekly hashtag from @RenaChan, I'm afraid the Razer phone will just be an RGB accessory. He's right on the same point as you, Jules. More than a real mobile gaming breakthrough, just pretty colors.
And I should say that this was always referred to as a mobile device. It's phone per se.
Yeah, that's true. Just because you can pick it up and move it around doesn't mean that it's going to be a phone. That's a very good point.
Yeah, exactly. Because especially when like the teaser person in the picture that they sent out was like holding it horizontally like a Switch or something. Maybe it could be a great Switch competitor. I don't know.
Yeah, because the image that I saw made me think that it could be almost the size of like a small tablet. Like, what if it's the size of the Lenovo Fab 2 Pro? Like that would be that could be interesting.
3 inches. Yeah.
You know, it just it really depends. I'm just thinking. I'm worried about carriers being gun shy off of it because, as Peter Hayton was saying in Twitter, you look what happened with the Xperia Play and Verizon.
Yeah, and David Baptista Silva also brought up that same point too on Twitter. If consumers wanted a gaming phone, then devices like the N-Gage and the Xperia Play wouldn't have flopped. I think the N-Gage probably had a few more issues going for it with the remove the battery to switch the game and the Taco Tuesday sticking out the front of your face look. I can make that joke because I'm Hispanic. The rest of you can't because that's super racist. The thing I have concerns with, and it's why I feel like Microsoft might have missed the boat. You know, you had this great idea of a tie-in with Windows phones and Xbox, but the farther we get out from some of those flops, the more I have to wonder, since we rely on our phones for so much of our daily lives, does a potentially battery draining usage like mobile gaming work? I think consumers are kind of ready. I think the Switch shows us that it's okay to have a second device on you for a specialty purpose if that's something you're really into. Like if you're really into high quality audio, I think there's an argument to be made for a niche consumer to look at a branded media player. If you're really into gaming, you can leave your phone battery alone. You don't have to go out and buy the most powerful phone on the market to play some mobile games. You can also invest some cash in something like the Switch. Going to your point, back to your point, Jules, that maybe it makes more sense for Razer to sidestep the concerns over primary gadget usage and look at a companion device, something that plays really well in your mobile lifestyle, your mobile ecosystem, but is entirely gaming focused and not something that you have to worry about also making phone calls and Snapchatting and, doing all of your work on the go.
I should say that, when we're talking about Razer, we're talking about PC hardware that they're the most expertise in, as opposed to maybe some of the more as the Switch, because they have Razer, kind of unique, hardware going on for them.
Yeah. The reason why I wonder if maybe we're barking up the wrong tree with phones, though, is Razer has experimented with gaming tablets. Mm-hmm. A few very unsuccessful attempts at trying to break into slate mobile gaming, especially around the time of early Windows 8. This might be the right time to come back to it, though. I think mobile hardware has gotten powerful enough that you can deliver a pretty compelling mobile gaming experience, especially with advances in game portability, game streaming, where maybe I am running something off of my PC that's just dumbly connected to a mobile interface. Again, I'm looking at some good horror survival games. I want to run them from my PC because that's the proper experience. But if I don't want to lose out on continuing to progress through that game, maybe I could, for short bursts, migrate it over to a tablet and connect remotely.
Just watch as they have. You remember the old Asus ZenPad phone or whatever, where they,
the phone
just imagine a Robin just plugged in the back of this tablet.
Cloud Phone X. L.
Oh, the poor little Qualcomm 808 and that Robin just really melting down to try and deliver a good game stream.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, as far as processing power. Like with Razer's used to being able to put a super souped up graphics card, in whatever laptop they're going to build, but they're kind of stuck with the GPU that they've got, really. Yeah. So it's all going to be about the peripheral experience, really.
Well,
and you can't just plug a GTX 1080.
No, that's really like the exciting idea could be something, because I think Razer was ahead of the curve on so like my Razer Blade, it has a Thunderbolt port, which is great. I mean, it's a fully open Thunderbolt. I can do anything with it, USB-C or Thunderbolt 3. But the idea for Razer was to sell that peripheral of having an external GPU that you could connect over that protocol or that interface. I highly doubt that a mobile device is going to tap into that, but I think Razer has an idea of some kind of modularity usage specific scenarios where you can plug things in, adapt certain experiences to where you're at. So this could go hand in hand with that ecosystem. When you're at home with your laptop and you can plug it into that really hot GPU, you've got a killer gaming experience. When you're on the go and you don't want to have your laptop with you, maybe it's just the screen that interacts with your gaming hardware at home, and that's how you have your high quality gaming experience. I think that there could be some potential there.
That sounds like quantum computing to me, because if we're referring to GPUs at home, okay, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, no, I was gonna say, like, it'd be nice for them to do some partnerships, like, say, you know how, you know, you got, say, maybe have some sort of Steam Link functionality, or have, of course, EA would never do this, but have some sort of Origin or Bethesda. You know, it'd be kind of interesting to be able to bring that experience to your mobile device and then plug in whatever Bluetooth peripherals you might have.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, like, why I keep crashing back hard into PC gaming is I get super cranky knowing that if I buy something for a console, it stays with that console, where I can load up the original Fallout through my Steam account and play that. I mean, like, that's kind of a big deal for me.
I mean, this is what your wife is for, basically. This is you got to get your way into EA. You got to get them told. You know?
Well, my wife works for Activision. Let's not make.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Let's not make that confusion again. If she watches this, I'm going to be in trouble that anyone said that. Horrible company, EA. I'm absolutely joking there. We've got one other tweet that here I'm going to cover from Urban Tech Daily. Game machine first phone, second functionality over aesthetics. Basically a tank with front-facing speakers and a massive battery. That could be kind of compelling. I think that might have some crossover. If a company went out there and said, it's for gaming, but it's going to do everything else really well, and it's got a 6,000 milliamp hour battery to last you 2 straight days of use. It could be kind of epic.
As long as it's got a kickstand, then we're set.
Always need that kickstand.
I love it. I mean, no, seriously, like I was digging through old drawers, and I found an old HTC with a kickstand, and you're like, you know, this is actually kind of nice.
Yeah, they were great. You know, when I worked at Best Buy, we had all of the, what was it? The Evo 4G LTE and that little kickstand. Every other one I'd see, they'd just be snapped off.
Wow. People suck. It was like back in the day when the iPhone 6 came out. I wasn't working for Pocketnow yet. When the iPhone 6 came out, I did a video telling people, like, if you're going into Apple stores and purposely bending iPhone 6s, then you're an asshole. Boy. You're a jerk. And people actually fought me on that. Oh, consumers need to know that the phone can bend. You're like, that's destruction of property is not the right way to do that. So don't be a jerk. How about we just live our lives with this idea of don't be a jerk? How about that?
It's like, that's why we got Jerry Rig Everything, you know.
Right. I'll make a hashtag. How about that? Kids tend to like the hashtags. I do want to
Jerry Rig Everything. No, we love you.
Yeah, really. Well, like the success of that channel coming down to a certain flavor of gadget destruction porn that he does phenomenally well in his consistency in how he takes those phones apart. I mean, it's so compelling, even though I myself hate watching phones get messed up. But,
you gotta have him on the show.
We should have him on, especially when I made fun of him in my April Fool's video. I did the scratch and bend test on a sweet potato. I do want to touch briefly on the Wells Fargo story, because I think this is sort of an interesting development in how long it takes an established technology to catch on. But now we're starting to see some consumer traction. And Andrew, I was kind of wondering about your thoughts. Since you're in the Midwest, and we've had some of these funny conversations, since Jules and I are coastal elites, and we have all of the hottest technology when we go grocery shopping to tap and pay. Have you seen any traction on Android Pay or Apple Pay in your neck of the woods?
I actually have finally started seeing traction. There's a lot of course, chain places will have it. A lot of other chain places won't have it for some reason. It might have changed recently, but for a long time, I know that Hy-Vee, which is big here in the Midwest and Illinois, also didn't have it. But we're getting a lot of stores that are finally getting it. The nicest thing for my situation, because I had a legacy card on there for a long time, because we could use legacy cards when they first rolled it out. And so I had my card on there, and it was great until they stopped support of it, and then I couldn't use it until PayPal became a supported method. And that is actually a big thing that a lot of people actually here that I've talked to didn't even realize that you can use PayPal with it. I've gone into more than one. I've encountered more than one cashier who's been a little bit confused, wanting to look at my PayPal app or the Android Pay app. But it's starting to get traction, and now that because there's a lot of small banks out here that don't support it, so having PayPal is a big thing with it.
Right.
Only thing I'm worried about is with the ATMs. You know how, gosh, you'll see those scam ATMs where they'll put like the whole ATM like over the top of it so they can get your card information. They'll just have to have a little thing now with a little NFC tag.
I mean, the skimmers were also kind of, it's a zero-sum game with that, because I feel like that is just as easily not detectable if you're in a rush and whatnot.
Right.
Having a fake NFC reader, you would have to find some way to have some sort of proximity to both.
Well, isn't the whole
point like that could be
and this is something I'm woefully ignorant on. Isn't the point of a system like Apple Pay or Android Pay, you are interacting with an NFC chip, but the transaction is is basically creating a dummy account number for the solo interaction of that one purchase. So if you were to skim that data, you might be able to intercept one payment, but it wouldn't work for future payments, right?
That's true. Yeah, you're right on that. Good thinking. And that's why we have these protocols in place so that we
I don't know. It's pretty funny. I mean, like, because we've been seeing a lot of larger companies moving over to tap and pay functionality. In my neck of the woods here in near Encino, it's funny that local businesses, the more family owned and the mom and pop shops, are still mostly focused on chip and pin. Like, you still need to have a card. But their high tech has been moving over into other services like Square or iPad-based point of sale services. So you don't have the old school like credit card machines that you'll see at like a big box store. Instead, it's like an iPad on a special stand with a credit card skimmer or a chip reader. And that seems to be the more popular solution there. So a lot of them are now starting to support tap and pay, but we've seen the adoption rate actually it has been kind of slow, because people haven't been wanting to invest in the traditional, more expensive point of sale systems. They've been wanting to use more mobile gear for that.
Well, one thing I'm wondering too is my experience for myself has mainly been Android Pay specific.
Right.
Apple Pay is by default has had a much bigger rollout just because they have much finer control on that. Like, my sister's been using it for several years, but so it's just one of those. I figured I'd put that out there.
Well, and the consumer education, because I don't think a lot of people out here realize that just because there's like a little sign that says it's Apple Pay compliant, that it's most likely also Android Pay compliant. They just didn't want to pay for extra stickers.
Oh yeah, they'll get that's the Google Wallet. I see Google Wallet signs everywhere still.
Right. Oh, it's so sad. I loved the name Google Wallet. I like that better than Android Pay. I'm so sad that it got all messed up. Messed up because of ISIS.
You got
ISIS killed Google Wallet.
Oh. No, well, it became soft card, and then it softly disappeared.
I don't care. Just like ISIS.
It went away. It went away just like ISIS.
Jump in with something else. We should probably change topics.
Yeah. I was about to just one thing, and that is, I would like to see ATMs just completely no interface on the ATM. Just tap it to a NFC reader and do everything on the phone. Like, I think we're about well in time for that. Just do the pin on the phone, do the whatever the heck that the app needs.
So I agree. I just think the timing on this will probably take a little while, because we have to get to a point where we assume that even the most economically challenged members of our society have access to a device that can handle that. I mean, it's the frustration when we're still seeing like $200 entry-level phones that omit NFC. Like, that's some kind of luxury accessory So I agree with you, Jules. Like, I think it's something that's right around the corner.
$3 part that you can stick into the back of the phone.
I mean, just imagine if your phone price then went up to $205.
Oh my God.
I would totally buy this phone if it were $5 less expensive.
Well, if it were $204.95, I would buy it.
Well, in China, they have oh gosh, I was watching recently the video about the gentleman who makes his own iPhone, as well as the one where he puts the headphone jack in. Yeah. Well, what's the app that they use? It's kind of a mix of Facebook and a lot of others that they use for a lot of payments. And does that not? It didn't look like they use NFC to me.
No, WeChat uses QR codes, I believe.
Yeah, QR codes.
Oh yeah, because I mean that could be. I mean, gosh, if they had that as well too, that could be good for the people who are getting $50 smartphones to be able to use.
It totally would be. It's just kind of funny how reticent North Americans were to play with things like NFC tags and QR codes. I remember, like those initial like tap stickers that you would get from Samsung. You could program them to do different things.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, everyone was coming out with QR codes and no one was scanning them. And
well, I think they would have used it more if the actual app, built-in camera app, supported it.
True.
Because that's the big thing. Motorola is the only one I know of off the top of my head that did that. And then because I have to go and download Herpeter app and do it.
No, because and I think you're right. I think the problem is one of like I complain about Apple. The problem is one of conveyance, where I believe modern Samsung phones should be able to scan QR codes, but it might be through Bixby Vision. I could totally be lying, and someone's going to correct me on that very shortly. Just as viewer at Rena Chan is confirming that NFC transactions create a unique key for every transaction. So it's probably more secure than if you use a credit card swipe.
I was wondering what the tokenization process was where the tap was going, but whatever. I think that's right. That's all right.
Yeah. I think that's pretty good. So I do want to move on to, speaking of security and security issues, I do want to talk about OnePlus because I think this is another minor black eye for a company that this year has not been handling the consumer discussion very well on their products and features.
Just because you have a forum doesn't mean that you can necessarily do all these things single-handedly and not really address the consumer concerns in the way that you would like to, as opposed to say, yes, we serve you. This is for your own good. You don't need to do that. Like, we've seen that before, and that hasn't turned out well.
I think this is a major misstep for a company because they're trying to build their fan base up by appealing to, I think the louder contingent of Android fans.
Mm-hmm.
The never settle, the flagship killer. This is language meant to emotionally target the tech savvier Android fans out there who are also cost conscious. This is exactly the wrong group of people to upset.
Yes.
In user data. What are your thoughts on their reply? Because I feel like a lot of people will feel it's probably insufficient to address the concerns at hand.
Well, it's like with Google. I mean, if it was Google and they had that reply, I'd be a little more accepting, just because we have a lot more there's a lot more user-facing products that benefit from all the information they gather.
Right.
That like products that they come out with and that they incorporate into their devices that we get benefits from, that we can use every day. OnePlus, it's a lot more foggy with what they're using that for. They say they need it. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't have as big a problem if it was just, they were just transparent about it, what they were going to use it for specifically. And like, we're using this to improve X and Y features on our phones. Well, I mean, it comes down to trust level at that point, but transparency is the big thing, especially because I mean, we like transparency,
right,
as viewers and people who know how to use the nuances of our services and devices that we use. But yeah, I don't know. I wish they'd elaborated a little more.
Well, and Jules, I mean, so there is obviously a process that you can engage in if you go through the developer settings to disable this kind of tracking.
You have to ADB and run a command to do it.
There was a way to just turn it off. You actually have to uninstall, like through it.
Yeah. So there. Okay. So there is one developer setting tool in the advanced settings menu, which, you know, I mean, you'd be able to just tap the Android logo 7 times in that
Right.
little area or whatever, and then you can get to it. But in order to like actually really stop it from being, you know, all torn down, you should definitely run the ADB code. It's a simple.
That's like a bad Douglas Adams joke just waiting to happen. In an unmarked lavatory with a sign that says "Beware of the leopard" is how you have to go about finding.
Well, and it's also rough too because ADB can be really intimidating to someone, who, even if it's an enthusiast who hasn't, like for me, for example, the last time I messed with ADB was on my one M8 that I soft bricked like 3 times messing with it. So, you know, it's like I'm staying away from that, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just recently wrapped up our Xperia XZ1 compact review, and I went through about 2 hours of flashing firmwares to try and enable the fingerprint sensor. And I'm almost positive I am doing something wrong in flashing a new firmware, but I still couldn't get it to work. And it's not like I'm not at least somewhat familiar with these types of tools and a little more tech savvy than your average bear. And it still was something that I couldn't get working. When it comes back, getting back to OnePlus, I think one of the things that bothers me is when we're tracking this information that they're collecting on users. Going back to your point, Andrew, we might be more permissive of Google tracking our data. And rightfully, I think we're getting more benefit from it. But I think we also have additional trust that Google probably has a more secure bucket and is doing a better job of keeping us anonymous with that data than OnePlus is. Because if I'm reading,
because OnePlus,
this right,
yeah,
it's just like literally your serial number attached to your usage in a big bucket, where if that were compromised, people would have access to some fairly significant privacy, you know, attached data on how you're using your phone. And I don't trust a company as small as OnePlus under the larger umbrella of the company that also owns Oppo to guard my data like I would Google, who actually creates the systems that we're utilizing this information.
And we had to find this out ourselves too.
Exactly.
It was just like that Blue Shanghai ATMs firmware deal where a security firm had to find this out, and you know, the two weren't really forthcoming with what that data was being used for. There were doubts, and even though everything has been sorted out with Blue and Shanghai ATMs, to the point where they had to take off Amazon, you know, get off of Amazon for a few days before coming back. That still has left some doubt in our minds too. So it's kind of just not a good situation in order to play down these things and say, yeah, you're like, we're not sending this over to the CCP. So
yeah. I mean, well, and people, it's getting less and less. You know, my old argument was, well, I'm just boring. You know, what are they going to want with my? No, you can't really use that anymore. That excuse anymore with how much that they're gathering.
Adam Dowd.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have anything to hide, then you're good, and so don't be a criminal. There's a lot of stuff. Well, and silly things too, like, you know, I don't
anything
want
to
data tracked on my devices. It doesn't mean I'm a criminal or I'm engaging in illegal activities. It's just I don't want that to be freely accessible.
If someone has a narrative strong enough and an intent malicious enough, you're going to be, you know, taken for a ride.
Well, and I do think it'll be another sort of cultural, and this is going to be sort of a cultural and etiquette thing, that shift between convenience, services, products, as we start getting into a more augmented reality world. I mean, literally the view from my eyeball is something that will be trackable information. So we are still going to keep running into this perpetual debate over privacy, security, and convenience. But this, I think, is a good example of how to do it wrong.
Yes.
So hashtag OnePlus doing it wrong. I do want to jump in quickly. A company that not a company, a service that I've only used sparingly on my Note 8. Are we excited about Bixby 2.0? Do we think that this is going to bring something fresh to the table in a world where Google is actually getting really aggressive with their Google Assistant strategy?
It's always the promise of third-party developers, and that rarely ever comes true. devoted, dedicated, focused thing. It doesn't come out like that. It comes in trickles, and those trickles eventually die out if they don't have enough media coverage or not enough people use it or whatever the heck. So, I mean, I don't know. And especially because those third-party developers, there was a very limited frame in which they could get involved with the first version of Bixby. So, I mean, if you weren't on the ground floor with that, where does the elevator lead up to? So.
Oh yeah,
well, and Andrew, are you using Google Assistant, Alexa? Are you using anything like that?
I've used Alexa. Well, I've used Google Assistant for the basic things. Alexa, I've used it to play the Jeopardy game once.
I really like the Seinfeld trivia game.
Oh yeah,
I've already exhausted the entire run of all of the different questions that they've got.
Oh yeah, there's I think Samsung is really, their marketing is wrong for Bixby. But they need to be, honestly, I think that since they don't have the access to all the sheer amount of data that that Google has at their disposal, they really should be marketing it and concentrating towards accessibility for people with, I feel like, people who might be blind or have, that's something I feel like that they could actually, that they do better than Google does right now, because they have functionality for opening up specific apps or doing specific things. Well, that's something that I don't think they don't necessarily need to have all the amount of data that Google has at their disposal to be able to pull off something like that and have a good foundation to build on.
Right.
And everyone's thinking, well, they're marketing it as basically use this instead of Google Now or Google Assistant, that is. But people are already setting what they're using. But there are a lot of people out there who use smartphones and smart devices who would very much appreciate the better accessibility features in Android, I feel.
I mean, when you're coming into this clean,
go ahead.
Sorry. When you're coming into this clean, the whole AI digital assistant space, that Bixby key is supposed to be something very convenient for you, one-touch access, and then boom, you're right into it. As opposed to if you're already into Google Assistant, Cortana, or whoever the else you're dealing with, it's an annoyance. You can't reprogram that to be a Google system button. The services you feel don't do the things the way that Google used to do it, that Apple used to do it. It's just not you, and you're having a very, very hard time adjusting. It's all about first contact, I feel. And if this is the first contact, great for Samsung. If it's not, they don't have a means of adjusting those users.
What do you mean by first contact? Do you mean like a user's first experience using it?
With the
right. I think that's also one of the reasons why like Google has gone through several permutations of their voice assisted search, like from Google Now and Google Cards, Google Assistant, and they're really not different services. I think part of this is if we rebrand it, call it something new, people will try it again and see that there's a lot more functionality. Especially because Bixby's rollout was so hamstrung. Like it took a lot longer to get to English speakers than I think Samsung intended. There was a lot of negative sentiment or negative commentary regarding a useless button on your phone before we really had a chance to play with it. To your point, Andrew, I think one of the things that it's done phenomenally well are macros. Making macros more consumer accessible so that you can deliver a very short or small command that triggers a number of different outcomes. To your point, Peter Hayton using the PN Weekly hashtag, the idea behind Bixby is good and it can be good at reaching inside apps. If this were Assistant, we could see a better product, like sort of melding those two ideas together. From Renato Laporte, is Bixby IFTTT enabled? That makes things so much easier to connect with other services. I don't believe Bixby has any ability to use IFTTT. And that's if this then that, where you can set up services for different macros for different services, which would be actually, I think, a really compelling usage scenario for Bixby. And then from David Brown at David B Linux on Twitter, as a blind user, Android already has accessibility services that work well. Samsung already ported Talk Back. So maybe this is also sort of overlapping things that people who utilize the current accessibility services might not necessarily need.
Dude, my questions, and I've not had a huge amount of experience with using them firsthand, as far as, you know, needing to use them. But I'm wondering, do they go kind of stepped into the apps? Like, say, could I say, like, I'd like to be able to say, take a photo and share on Instagram,
right?
Or something like a two-step sort of thing. But
are you concerned about all the blind photographers out there?
I don't know. You know. They might enjoy it, you know.
I'm being obnoxiously facetious, and seeing as how I'm not blind, I'm not allowed to make that joke. Well, you can send your hate mail to podcast.
Appropriate anything once you have released yourself from these barriers that you're bound to.
Making a joke about the accessibility settings on a phone camera, is that culture appropriation? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, there is a certain kind of culture when it comes to that, but I think they can just equip themselves with light show cameras and then take the existing light fields and just be able to 3D print those into a somewhat tangible form and touch those, and then they'll finally realize what's like, and it's kind of it's great.
Speaking of cameras, we don't have to spend a lot of them. In fact, we shouldn't spend a lot of time on this next story. The Mate 10 20 and 23 megapixel cameras are what I don't think Huawei joins or rejoins the camera battle this year. I don't think anyone's going to be impressed by higher resolution. Do we think that this is going to deliver anything else in addition to more dots to edit, or what could they do to make their cameras more compelling?
Will this affect their 2x zoom ability? Because before it was because they had the smaller megapixel camera and then the greater one, and that allowed them to kind of do the faux 2x zoom. Is this them being almost equal going to affect that at all? That's one thing I'm curious about.
Well, I don't think more resolution is going to be a problem. I think more resolution will actually benefit zoom, because you'll have more room to crop, to then sample the image, and then to blow the image up. Or I wonder, maybe could this potentially be something like a resolution hack like what Sony used, where you would have like a 20 megapixel sensor, but then the preferred output is closer to an 8 megapixel image, which allows you to better remove noise and preserve detail.
Right.
And I was going to ask about the noise.
Yeah. Well, in Huawei phones, we aren't afraid of noise.
I mean, like Andrew and I offline, like I shared this photo of Lex sleeping, and she's lit by a hallway light, like again, like completely outside the room. And I took it from my Mate 9, so not even the wider aperture on a P10 Plus. And it's just like, it's grainy and it's gritty and it's dark and it's super high contrast, and you're like, this is exactly what I wanted from this photo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's about to kill someone in her sleep, isn't she?
Oh no, it's great because again, toddlers sleep in the most ridiculous positions, and she was just like, like bending into the corner of her crib. But
that's always part of it, the graininess and the grittiness. Yeah, exactly. That's more sinister, and you could use that to your advantage sooner or later.
I'm trying to make my daughter sinister, dude. She's a toddler. All toddlers are evil. We know that, but I think she's one of the more benign evil toddlers. I want to jump into the last two stories so that we can get to the main topic for the rest of this podcast. But HMD executive saying that the Nokia 8 not going to arrive in North America. One, are we surprised? Two, can a company build a smartphone brand following or build brand loyalty by continuing to ignore North America? Does it make sense for them to try and play in North America?
I have no idea, except for I'll relate to an analog where Motorola has launched the Moto G5 Plus and the Moto G5 S Plus, whereas the lesser capable, lesser spec non-plus versions of those devices didn't make it over to the US. I think capitalizing on what they can make the most of. The scattershot approach in the US doesn't necessarily work as well. Their most successful phone here, Nokia, that is, so far is the Nokia 6, I believe. So,
and it's just a matter of getting them in front of people.
Right.
You know, like at my Best Buy that I go to, like they had Huawei phones up, like the Honor 8, they had the Mate 9, they had a couple of others up there for I'd say between 4 to 6 months. Then they took them down. They have Sony ones up there now, but it's just a matter of if you don't see it, people people are a lot more hesitant to buy if they can't just feel one in their hand.
Right.
And that's a huge barrier. And I mean, I've not seen any Nokias that aren't Windows phones in the wild here at all.
I mean, I still have a couple friends, two specifically that I know of that are on Lumia 520s. They're those kinds of people who do nothing but cover the absolute bare minimum basics, you know, in checking their email. I think one of them like will occasionally tweet and like, you know, I bought this phone for $80. So if I smash it, I don't care. And those phones are still running. Like crazy outdated software apps that haven't been updated, but that's what they want. They can text, they can email, and that's about it. So.
Oh, here's a little odd thing. Renata Laporte with the PN Weekly hashtag. The Nokia 8 is not even banded correctly for Europe. Where are bands 30 and 41? They're cheapskates on the modem.
Oh, and that's disappointing to have a Nokia name on that and to not have good radio support. That's like the whole point of a world enabled.
Like that was the whole excuse for the US thing. Like that person that I just mentioned at the top was like, hey, it's not properly branded for the US. Sorry, we would like to give you 110% of our support. Well, where's 110% support for Europe? Like, hello.
Right.
It's like I would like to see Nokia now come to the US and basically try and fill the niche that the OnePlus One filled. Like, because I mean, I think they could do that with build material, like get some of the costs and the build materials down and use the nice Nokia polycarbonate design that they had, you know, like on the 1520 and whatnot. And because I think that's really, if you're not going to go through the carriers, going at that price point is your safest bet. I feel like, as far aside from, you know, making money off the thing, that's another question. But actually just getting your foot in the door, I feel like that's something that's a lot easier to break into if they're going to skip the carriers.
No, I'm glad you brought up the polycarb. It's just a shame because I seriously doubt HMD is ever going to walk us back to that high quality plastic because it was such a great feel. And right now everyone's super impressed by glass or ceramic or something slippery. And it's such a bummer. I went off on like another rant. I forget where I was. Oh, I was on a set. I was on a shoot, and someone else was there, and they were just talking about the other sound guy I was working with, how he just switched from an iPhone to a Pixel. And one of his reasons, like, I didn't want the iPhone 8, I didn't want a glass back phone. And then it caused us to go down this rabbit hole of, hey, you remember that Motorola that had Kevlar? Hey, you know how like Moto had leather? Hey, you know what we need is carbon fiber, you know, like just like any other material instead of glass that could still have wireless charging, but still denote a quality product.
I mean, I'm still waiting for my denim phone. Hello. I told them blast
like literally from the denim update, I want a denim phone. I want the Levi's stitching on the back to show off how that matches my 501s.
I've always wanted that cork skin that was on the M8 that was actually the very first video of yours I ever saw one, and I didn't even it was like one of the first videos I ever saw of yours.
It was from a manufacturer who we're not going to mention in this podcast because they're not sponsoring.
This is true.
But no, that was a phenomenal feel in the hand. It was such a great skin for that phone. I loved it. It was phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, real quick, we should wrap up the news block because we have to talk about VR real quick. Oculus Rift dropping a $199 all-in-one unit VR headset. It sounds like they're sort of piggybacking on their relationship with Samsung, driving the Gear VR. Do we think that this will move the needle on consumer VR? Or do we think that this ship is starting to pass people by like 3D TVs were?
I don't know. I really don't. It's like smartwatches where we thought like all these market analysts in these reports keep saying, hey, this is going to be explosive by 2020. We're going to see 5 times volume and whatnot. And we're already halfway from those 2015 estimates, and it's been kind of weak, and we haven't been feeling it. It's only now that we've really dug into the cellular part of things, and that's mostly thanks to, well, perhaps nearly all thanks to Apple Watch. So
right,
I don't think that, I'm not sure if this is that kind of development, if this is the cellular of VR that we should be looking for.
Yeah, I think that I really like the approach. Well, part of the approach that LG did with their VR viewer with the G5, as long as the VR viewer didn't stink like it did, like having where you could just plug it into the USB-C port, set it down, right, or whatever, or have it on a little side here and be able to kind of look around. For me, the only things I'd use VR for is if I'm like laying down and looking up at the ceiling and watching like a movie or something. But I mean, it just depends. I think it's better that the price is getting lower, because that's going to get it into more people's hands. And it's just kind of, we're going to feel along and see if it sticks, it sticks. I hope it does. But I think AR is kind of taking steps ahead right now, and within the last 6 months in perception.
Yeah, definitely. I think AR has the more exciting potential long term. But one of the things that I've been kind of curious, like I've been really trying to rack my brains. What are some of the usage scenarios that we can get consumers excited about virtual reality, especially now that we are hitting lower price points? $200 is still a lot of money, but it's a lot easier to engage with that as a platform than, when Oculus first launched. You were talking about multi-hundreds of dollars to purchase a headset and having to run it off of like a $1,500 computer. And so I posted an informal poll on the Pocketnow Twitter account. Have you ever worn a VR headset on an airplane? And to me, this seems like it would actually be a great usage scenario. We all hate flying. It's a terrible experience. So why not escape reality for a couple hours and watch a movie that, like you were saying, I want to lie on my bed and be all alone in my own movie theater. That could be a really interesting way to consume a film. And out of 800 votes, 6% of people said that they have actually flown and worn a VR headset. That's actually a lot higher than what I thought it would be. That's terrible, because that's definitely not an adoption rate that developers want to hear. But I think we might be getting over the consumer fear of face computing, right? Like Google Glass had that horrifically negative consumer response because it was too Borg-y on your face. Now we have a few intrepid individuals who are willing to brave the social reaction of putting a computer on their face in an environment like an airplane. And I think if that starts to trickle, if that trickles into more of a flow and that flow becomes more of a river, that might actually help move the needle on less expensive VR hardware, when we can find a few usage scenarios where it makes sense to cover your face with geeky stuff. I think that could actually show some potential long term.
I mean, you see the pictures. It's just a extended little goggles thing, and it's not like Borg.
Totally.
Yeah, as you said, total wires coming off the back like it's a freaking ponytail or something. Like, that's crazy.
Well, because what I think is hilarious is that Oculus's solution looks a lot like Daydream, in its just complete and total simplicity. And instead of putting your phone in the front of this case, I think that's a big problem with Daydream right now, is, again, you have to put your phone into this container. It's going to destroy your battery life. It's going to run super hot. After about 10 minutes, I'm sweating buckets, and I never want to give someone else my Daydream viewer. There's the Gunslinger game that I love playing, but I can only play it for about 10 minutes at a stretch, and I'm dripping with sweat by the time I'm done playing it, because my pixel is just roasting away on my face. The Galaxy actually does a much better job on the Qualcomm 835, but it's still running really hot by the time I'm done.
Although I have noticed that your forehead has been a little bit more fit these days, so congratulations.
Yeah, I'm trying to get away from having my double chin and 5 head. I'm sort of generally trying to shrink all dimensions. But thank you for noticing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, if Oculus's solution here, I think, is a viable one because it doesn't rely on your phone. It's self-contained. It's not going to kill battery life by having a companion device powering it. This could be the compelling next step into getting consumers interested in this type of usage. And I think it's a much better fit for potentially getting schools on board. If we're going to use VR as some kind of educational,
you got to buy these things in bulk.
Educational platform. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So we're pretty happy for that. And we're pretty happy that we're all here to talk about some hot takes.
Woo woo.
The sound effect would come in. Hello. Anyways, we are here to talk now in an abrupt transition over to Apple, to the iPhone, and to older iPhones in particular, especially as newer and newer software versions.
Older iPhones, I don't even understand how you can use them. They all get so slow once you install the new operating system update, says everybody who owns an older iPhone.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. Is it true, though? They're all dirty liars.
The makers of 3D Mark, the benchmarking platform that has been pretty popular, although they have more competition, so there's more data, blah blah blah. Take these numbers at your own risk. They have run some tests and have run a plethora. I mean, we're talking about all the way back to April 2016, so that's through iOS 9 on the iPhone 5S, 6, 6S, and 7. And you can take a look at Pocketnow.com for the bar graphs yourselves, but they're pretty consistent. The GPU performance on the iPhone 6S actually, the iPhone 6 actually went up in the latest, like by a good, decent chunk. But it's mostly been a pretty consistent ride.
Yeah, the only phone, according to their benchmarking, the only phone that showed any type of degradation was the iPhone 7's CPU performance through the various iterations of iOS 10 to iOS 11. And we're talking by, I think, a margin of error degree, the amount of performance degradation that we saw. So the question that I would have of their testing setup, I don't believe that these were real world used phones with personal data accruing, different databases being backed up, contacts, calendar, individual personalized usage throughout the day, apps that need to be updated that don't always perfectly clear their cache or their databases when they're being used. You've got a lot of flotsam and jetsam going around, and the daily abuse that a phone experiences. So like a phone that gets run really hot, the battery that starts to degrade, the chipsets that's starting to get a little more worn out. I mean, even just the hardware concerns, we might see, maybe it is just like a 2 or 3% drop in performance over the year that you really use your phone as your daily companion. But then you add that with other apps that are being updated, other software that's being updated. And I think
all don't have the same API libraries too that they can optimize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think one of the things that's funny is that they were saying that it's one of the quotes from the article that we posted on Pocketnow.com. Conversely, apps designed for an earlier version of iOS might not take full advantage of optimizations in the latest version of iOS. So a newer app might be more graphics intensive, might actually tax your phone hardware more, but the older app might not take advantages of operating system optimizations and improvements and tax your hardware more.
And here's the thing that I feel is kind of being missed out upon is that we open these apps all at once. Are we trying to open one app and then it's taking too long, so we just get out of that and open another app? It's how we use our phones in part that kind of exacerbates this slowness behavior, and we're just looking at it and it's just so frustrating. And we think that this is all part of Apple's design. We know for a long time, we have known that this is all in the design of planned obsolescence.
Oh, planned obsolescence. Absolutely. Apple has made a concerted effort to make your phones run terrible. And they even talk about it during their keynotes where they say that this phone is going to be so much better than that crappy old phone that you're using because it's the best iPhone ever. Now, Andrew, you use a Huawei Mate 9, so you have no idea what we're talking about because of the machine learning in the Huawei making you impervious to your phone aging over time. Have you had any experience? Like, I think those of us in Android land are probably a bit more sensitive to slowdowns because the Android ecosystem is so much more open and that updates come more sparingly. So when there's a bug fix or an optimization, it goes through this ridiculous process of manufacturer to carrier to device, as opposed to Apple, where it's a bit more, company to customer. So how long have you held on to like the phone that you used before you picked up your Mate 9? And do you feel like it was running consistently similar to when you first picked it up, or did you feel like it was starting to show its age? Or did we lose Andrew? He frozen?
We have lost him. He's frozen in an arm folding position. I mean, we know he has a heart out, but I'm not sure what.
No, he was mentioning before we were going to jump on the podcast too that he was having some issues with his cable company. So that
and now he's like giving us a little cheers on that front. And now
I've been joking with Andrew too, if you were watching the live stream, that he needs to get a new profile photo because, like me, there's less of Andrew than there was when he took that photo. He's looking a lot better now, and so I'm going to make fun of him.
Yeah, there's more beverage and less Andrew. So to say. So.
All right, I'm back. Sorry, guys.
Whoa.
No.
Oh boy, my internet is just making my hair gray.
Yeah. Well, and again, another reason why you need to take a better profile photo than the one that you got. It's wholly inaccurate to actually describe what you look like right now. But so I was gonna say, so the phone that you had before your Mate 9, did you feel like it was starting to slow down with age?
Oh yeah.
What were you using before you picked that up?
Well, I have my my V10, which I'm gonna be honest. Like software, you can't really tell because that 808 was
it was a dog.
Yes, and it got hot. Battery life was not great, but even after I bought a new battery, I literally I have 3 batteries here that I would just have on me in my pockets, hoping that I don't sit on any like thumbtacks or anything,
Right.
Yeah, but and so like it had trouble, especially like I'll go dig it out and I'm just kind of looking like, oh my gosh, there's a huge difference as far as just overall, but I can't separate it out just based off of software. I will say software difference. Like I've not had the Mate 9 for that long, but the build is older, and I see performance better on the Mate 9. However, there are some UI inconsistencies that I find, but I think that's just because LG has especially with Nougat, refined it a little, but was hobbled by the processor on this. And this one, I'll get little dumb things like if I'm using the camera app and the RAW toggle disappears, or something, and I'm like, what?
Why would that change?
Yeah, it changes all the time. Or I'll get some sort of issue with the lock screen where I'll have Google Play Music going, and it'll have like the full magazine sort of lock screen, how Huawei does it. Mm-hmm. But then I'll turn it off and I'll turn it on again, and it's just like a band at the top, and it looks like EMUI 4. What is this?
What's hilarious about this, because Andrew and I are pretty big fans of Huawei devices, and I think maybe 2% of the Android phone ownership community in North America have any idea what we're talking about when we complain about EMUI 4. Jules, getting back to Apple real quick. Isn't part of the problem with individual use on something like the perceived slowdown of a phone just so highly anecdotal that it's kind of impossible to study? I don't know that we can definitively point to, the manufacturer influence over OS fragmentation on iOS. Like, you will all get iOS 11, but that doesn't mean you're going to get all of the new features of iOS 11. We can reasonably point to just how disposable our phones are becoming in general as something that you're going to be encouraged to upgrade yearly or every other year.
See, this is the problem with talking about iPhones, and that you're able to keep them for longer as heirlooms, whereas Android, you have more inconsistencies and more of these gaps that people can notice, and that they can point to. It's just like they're much more frustrated by those. But
right,
I feel like when iPhone users come into this and they sort of have to deal with these slowdowns every once in a while that pop up, it's just like, well, I have to get to my images, my photos, I have to get to my music. I think they have much more of a tie, of a emotional tie of just services to Apple, because that's what
I think that actually is a great point. Is when you do run into a lag or a hitch on an iPhone, it's more likely to stand out from the daily usage than it might on an Android device. And I know people are going to drop tons of comments like, "Oh, I have a Galaxy whatever, blah blah blah, and it never lags." And you're like, that's probably not true. We're just willing to overlook a certain inconsistency in performance to a degree that an iPhone user, especially a general consumer, might not understand why an app update causes their iPhone to load a program longer, or a game might struggle to load a level as fast as it used to. We have a couple comments here from @RenaChan on Twitter using the PN Weekly hashtag. One, iPhones could use more RAM, but they went with just enough for their optimization. So when apps get bigger, the system is more inclined to lag. And then he also mentions his S7 Edge went downhill after his Nougat update, to the point where having YouTube and Twitter open at the same time was super laggy. I can also kind of voice a similar concern. My wife had the regular S7, not the S7 Edge, and it got so bad. So she had filled up her storage with photos of our daughter, then moved them all to a memory card, and the phone never recovered. We wiped it out, and it was still slower than what we remembered it being when it was brand new. And she actually stole my my BlackBerry Key 1, so that's what she's using now instead.
Nice.
So even though the 625 is not as powerful as the 820 in the S7, she seems to be happier on the Key 1 than she was with the S7.
Well, and I'd be interested with the 808, for example, on this. I wonder how much of the processing, how much of the issues that I was having, it's most likely related to thermal throttling. I wonder how, if they had a heat pipe in there, if that would have negated any of it, because that's something I'd be interested to see.
I don't think so. I mean, because there were 810s with heat pipes that performance improved, but the chipset never ran as consistently as the 805. So it was more powerful than the 805. But if I pull out my Galaxy Note 4 and I compare it even to a clean phone like a Nexus 6P, I'll take the overall performance of the Note 4 every single time.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that in a burst of processing power, the 6P will beat it. But after you get over that initial burst, it's going to tank for any sustained performance issues. It's just not fun.
Oh yeah. Too many compromises, battery and all of that. It's, that's why the 625 is just so good for that. One thing as far as tanking performance, come back to Huawei. Have you noticed in your usage? I know that you had your After the Buzz and talking about how it's still a screamer. I mean, I've not had mine. I've only had mine for about 3 weeks, but it seems really fast as far as their because I remember Huawei promised, that these were going to maintain their speed, months and months later. And I mean, as I said, I don't have it, but how has it been for you?
Oh, my Mate 9. I mean, I'm actually using it right now to grind some Marvel Future Fight. I use it every day, mostly for gaming these days. But I'll still use it for the camera because I really do like the stills from Huawei cameras. The only thing that really has affected performance on mine has been almost maxing out the memory card. So one of the things they showed was like, you know, we do such an efficient job of garbage collection and keeping the device running smoother. And they show like, oh, if you have a Samsung and you have a Huawei and you've got a ton of photos and videos, will load way faster in the gallery app because of this optimization. If you're storing a ton of stuff on a memory card, it slows the Mate 9 way down accessing stuff from the memory card. And that's noticeable because if you store your photos and videos on the phone, it's still super snappy. But that's obviously outside of Huawei's control. Even though I'm using a pretty quick memory card, that's not on them. When it comes to the general performance of the phone, I find that this is still one of the better performers for more graphics intense games. It performs better on Marvel Future Fight than my S8 Plus does. Even though the Qualcomm, the 835 is supposed to be more powerful than the Kirin 960, it's supposed to have a better GPU. It seems to be doing a better job of the slowdown, the lag triggers. There are a couple characters that have special moves that totally kill my Galaxy, where they run pretty much fine on my Mate 9. So it's been overall a lot more positive experience than I thought it was going to be based on all the marketing speak.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, and that being said, with a less powerful GPU on it, it's still doing that than say a Qualcomm. So
again, you know, I mean, a lot of this is optimization, because I think a part of this is the developers on Future Fight just have no interest in supporting all the various different permutations of chipsets out there, and for whatever reason, the Kirin seems to work better than Qualcomm. Other games, I think that would probably flip, but that's the one that I grind the most. We have a couple of the tweets here before we wrap this show up from Peter Hayton. I wonder if part of Apple's problem is that they support them for so long. Again, we can talk about Apple as a victim of their own success. And then he goes on to say, as you say, Jules, that there are other inconsistencies. I wonder if when someone complains about an iPhone slowing down, it's because they're loading the newest version of iOS on a 4-year-old phone. I think at some point you've got to call it like, you know, you're not going to get great performance. But I can point to my S7 and say, when's it going to get Oreo, and shrug. You know, like,
well, it's like my mom has an iPad third gen, like the last one with the 30 pin, and she's having that problem too. Plus, it's a 16 gig that's full, so it's two sides of that coin. So you know, and it's a lot of it's just, you know, you gotta sunset it.
And from David Brown on Twitter using the PN Weekly hashtag. What I do to keep my performance up is to wipe my phone about once a year. I'm a custom ROM guy, so upgrading requires that kind of maintenance. I think that's not terrible advice for most people. I think, you know, just like you would expect to give your car a tune-up between 3 and 6 months, not a tune-up, but like an oil change every 3 to 6 months, we should probably start having that conversation about phone maintenance.
We already had that conversation. And it's about boyfriends and girlfriends and how I want to have sex. It's like later. I don't want to hear this.
I know not of this conversation you're speaking of, Jules. I'm a happily married man.
Delay.
Well, it's like, I mean, with my V10, I did that about once every couple of months, basically.
Yeah.
On there, and whether it's placebo effect or not, well, you know.
Yeah, that's.
Sure,
I mean,
placebo effect can count for a lot. You know what I mean? Like even if it's not necessarily really improving the situation for performance, it just feels like you're doing something that is going to help make your phone ownership a little less painful.
Yeah, well, at least we can ease the pain in terms of ending this podcast, I think, because we're able to end it in a graceful and lovely way.
We should. And Andrew, I want to thank you for joining this week. This was a fun conversation, and we should probably have you on again sometime. I guess maybe have you on again sometime.
Hey, I'm game. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. This has been fantastic. I mean, I've been a listener / watcher since probably late 2013, early 2014. So this is exciting as all heck to me.
Excellent.
Glad to have you on board finally.
Yeah, thank you.
I enjoy my time and my conversation with Andrew. If you guys are so inclined, you can catch us on our online book review show, The Geek Book Club.
Yes, and then here's my lower third.
Where you can not know who Andrew is because his lower third never works on Google Hangouts. I love it. So, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where Andrew is at Fat Produce, Jules is at Point Jules, and I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. For Spanish speakers, definitely check out es.pocketnow.com for your Espanol fix. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else podcasts can be reviewed. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, dbrand, helping protect your gadgets, customize your gadgets, and provide you with a little more grip so you don't break your iPhone 8 like I did. They're helping us keep the lights on. But ultimately, there would not be a show without our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness. So make sure you tune back in.